Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, death slaves, horse peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks. I'm Useful Idiot. Welcome. And let's go over to Afghanistan and Iraq by way of the United States in part two of this series I'm doing on military waste. And these overseas operations are great for the military-industrial complex. Not only did they love the Gulf War I, not only did they like the Gulf War II, they love these occupations, they love this new war on ISIS, they love the war in Syria. They love all these wars. And the fact is that these theaters of operation like Afghanistan and Iraq have been cash cows for the military industrial complex since for the last 20 years or so. And part of the cash cow for the military industrial complex, of course, is private contractors and just the privatization of a lot of the war effort, and this goes hand in hand with the garden variety selling of weapons, and then the training and arming of these proxy armies in Iraq and Afghanistan. But a good example of how much private money there is to be made, and remember too that a lot of these private contractors make 10, 20 times what the U.S. soldiers make in these theaters of operation. So these people are paid, in the hundreds of thousands as far as their salaries. But in Afghanistan, there's 68,000 U.S. troops, while at the same time there's 121,000 private contractors. And the same thing with Iraq. At one point there was 130,000 troops, but there was 113,000 private contractors. And contractors do basically all the lowest paid jobs, and they do all the highest paid jobs. And then you have the military filling in between. And then a lot of this with arrangements with these private contractors, of course, we've seen how much they've gouged the U.S. government, companies like Blackwater and the like. And like I say, because they are so highly paid, and then of course what they offer is dubious, but they also add up to a lot of hidden costs of these wars, because you have operational costs, you have costs outside the military associated with these operations, you have inflation, you have post and pre-operation costs, healthcare, military replacement, interest paid on all the money borrowed to pay for all of this, increased Social Security costs, and the cost to society in general. So in addition to just the way the payment to private companies, military contractors for their work in the theaters of operation and the military industrial complex for all their arms, in addition to just the monetary costs, like I say, there's all these hidden costs that are passed on to society as well. So we also have the U.S. has appropriated $65 billion to train Afghan security forces since 2002, and $25 billion to train Iraqi security forces since 2002. And we can't really get into the details of that because how the money was used is classified. But a 2011 report came out and said that between $31 billion and $60 billion was lost in Afghanistan and Iraq to fraud and waste. And that's pretty interesting when you consider that the U.S. appropriated $65 billion, just or 90 billion to train Iraqi and Afghan security forces, and of that, nearly 2/3 was lost to fraud and waste. And on top of that, $108 billion went for the reconstruction in Afghanistan, and $60 billion for the reconstruction in Iraq. And that doesn't include the cost of building all the U.S. bases, 505 bases in Iraq, 550 bases in Afghanistan. So once again, there's a huge amount of money, and all that goes into private contractors, goes into various forms of the military-industrial complex, and then these huge construction firms and multi-purpose firms like Halliburton and the like. So there's hundreds of billions of dollars more that are just ripe for fraud and waste, without going into a lot of the details. And then on top of that, we have another report that came out that talked about how many weapons that get shipped over there are lost. 465,000 small arms shipped to Afghanistan, most of those lost. And that's since 2001. U.S. report said that 48% of all the weapons shipped to Iraq and Afghanistan are unaccounted for. 1.45 million firearms to forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. 978,000 assault rifles, 266,000 pistols, 112,000 machine guns, and 48% are unaccounted for. 628,000 firearms to Iraq between 2003 and 2014, and that doesn't include another 300,000 weapons from Eastern Europe and Bosnia and the like. So we have upwards of anywhere between 50 and or 100,000. What is that? Well, needs to say hundreds of thousands of missing weapons, and there's so many money trails. Multiple agencies, reissue of captured weapons, ghost armies, corruption. All of that varies, like where these weapons end up, and there's no way to really factor in the cost. So once again, all these numbers are ballpark, but I can assure you, you can jack almost all of them up and get a more realistic look at exactly what's missing. In March 2016, Russia gave Afghanistan 10,000 Kalashnikovs. Apparently 2/3 of those are also missing. So not only do the United States have a problem, Russia has a problem getting weapons in Afghanistan without everything going missing. And I think one of my favorite kind of stories, a good example of the kind of waste that can be generated in a theater of operation like Afghanistan and Iraq, and see this opportunity for fraud, how easily it can be done, and what an epic scale it can be done. Look at a company like Triple Canopy. They were formed after the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003, and they had an army that only existed on paper and had not a single armored vehicle at the time, or gun, or weapon, or when they signed this contract. They bid on a Pentagon State Department contract and awarded a $90 million contract. Couple of goofy guys get together and don't have a single soldier, not a single armored vehicle, not a single gun, and they managed to get a $90 million contract to go in service for the government during the Iraq-Afghanistan wars. So there we have it, another part 2, looking at military waste, just looking at a little closer at how a theater of operation and these ongoing wars going on all over the Middle East and all over Africa are just a super cash cow for military contractors and these private corporations, these private companies, and the military industrial complex. So they love perpetual war, and so they're going to be happy for a long time because the American government is going to deliver exactly what they need, and the military industrial complex will provide everything the United States government needs, just at 100 times the price of what it would normally cost. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too?